Welcome to Growing Empires. I'm Jennifer DeJesus, real estate investor and operator. This show takes you behind the scenes of how real estate assets are executed, managed, and positioned for long-term performance. Let's get into it.
All right, so welcome back to the second episode in this story of Jen. And again, I'm Terry Pappy, and this is, of course, a wonderful series that we're doing to give you, the Growing Empires listener, an inside scoop on Jennifer's early days. So Jen, welcome back to our next interview, and we're going to talk about, again, the early days, but we're going to pick up where we left off. Where we left off, you were leaving us with a cliffhanger, and I interrupted you, and I said, no, we have to do this in the second episode. So let's pick up where we left off and talk about when you were working late that day, and that phone call came in, and you were like, give it to me. So let's go ahead and talk about that epiphany moment where you finally had that breakthrough call.
Sure. So just to back up a quick second, this was, agents sat in an office, right? That's what we did. We sat in an office. We waited for the phone to ring, hoped it rang, hoped there was somebody good on the other side. But the office was closing, right? The receptionists were going home. And Krista, the receptionist, says to me, Jen, I got this person on the phone, but I got to be honest with you. I can tell him nobody's here. You're the last person in the office. He sounds like kind of a jerk. And, I could just tell him that nobody's here. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, give me the damn phone. Right? And I was like, no, transfer it back to me. You can go home. You can lock up. You can do what you got to do. I'm taking the phone call. I need to make money. So I got on the phone, and this person's name is Bob, and Bob is still a very wonderful client, a friend, somebody I look up to. He's been an incredible source of education for me over the years, but Bob is amazing. Bob is absolutely amazing. At the time, again, we're going back many years, right? This is still 2009. We didn't get out of 2009 yet. Bob was looking for a student housing. His son was going to Lehigh University. We were close to Lehigh University. We did a lot of rentals, student rentals over there. And, he was looking for a home to buy that his son would live in and would eventually be a rental property for him. So when he called me, he had very specific criteria. And I think that's what the receptionist saw as like, the kind of the jerk, right? He wasn't a jerk. He was just very direct. He was very clear on what he wanted and how he was going to buy it and what he was going to do with it. So Bob said to me, listen, this is what I'm looking to buy. I have scoped out a couple of properties. I'm looking to buy a property for my son to live in. He's going to be going to Lehigh University this semester, and we're going to rent it out to him and some of his friends. And he gave me a couple of addresses. And, he's like, this is what I want to know. And he kind of just gave me the list. He was just very direct, very clear, very to the point. And before we got off the phone, he says to me, are you going to call me back? And I said, well, what in the world would make you ask me that? Of course I'm going to call you back. He goes, because you're the sixth agent I've spoken to today, and nobody has returned my call. And I said, well, that's a challenge I'm willing to take, Bob. I will call you back in 30 minutes with whatever I find. So I called him back in 20 minutes because I always do what I say I'm going to do. It's just the motto I've always had in business. You do what you say you're going to do, right? You don't make excuses, you just do it. So I found as much information as I could on that specific property he was asking me about. I called him back in 20 minutes and not 30. I gave him everything that he asked me for, top to bottom, everything that I found, and asked him if he had any additional questions or anything that I didn't find yet for him that he needed research on. And he says to me, if you keep giving me service like this, I will never, ever, ever use anybody but you. Well, that's a deal. So you can always count on me day or night, and I will get you the answers. So Bob didn't end up buying that specific property, but he did buy another property. So just like everybody looks around and some work and some don't, Bob didn't do anything different. I just kept listening And that was a really critical moment. I had to listen because what he was trying to do was buy an investment property. I wasn't selling investment properties. I was selling real estate. Investment properties were something completely outside of my scope of expertise, education, or anything at this point. So every time he would say something to me, like a word, he would say, my return on investment, my this, my that, I'd go back and Google it. And just be like, what is he talking about? Of course, Bob doesn't know that I was doing that, but I was Googling it and I was trying to figure out what did he say? What did he mean when he said that? Right. So I was like simultaneously self-educating myself so I didn't sound like an idiot when I called Bob back, But I wasn't in investment real estate and he was looking for an investment property. But again, it came down to just listening to what he was saying, listening to what he was asking for, researching whatever I didn't know, and I ended up finding him a property. Can you believe that he still owns that same property today? He still does. And it is a very fruitful property for him. It has made him so much money over the years that we kind of joke about not being able to sell it ever because it makes so much money. But yeah, he bought this property. And there's so many stories with just this property. We could spend weeks and months just talking about this property and all of my learnings on this property. But he bought a property. It was a 3-unit property on the hill up by Lehigh University. And turns out his son never lived in the property because his son never went to Lehigh after all that. But he bought the property and it was an investment property and he closed on it. The day that we closed on the property, he says to me, can you manage it for me? And I was like, yeah, yes, I can. And then the next day, I immediately ran into my broker's office and I said, I don't have any idea what I just promised this guy, but please don't let me fail. All you have to do is point me in the right direction because I don't know what that word means. I've never heard the term before. Manage your property. What does that mean? What does that look like? Right.
Right.
And I was just like, can you help me? Can you give me any education? And he's like, listen, we don't manage properties here. He says, but I can tell you who to talk to and I can tell you where to go to get some education. I said, perfect. Point me in the right direction. And he did. He pointed me in the right direction. And I learned what the concept meant, right? He wanted me to handle everything. He wanted me to collect rent. He wanted me to pay his bills. He wanted me to dispatch maintenance. He wanted me to deal with tenant relations. I mean, you name it, that's what he wanted me to do. And I ended up taking on this property with my broker's approval because it had to be under their broker's license. I wasn't a broker of record at that time. He allowed me to take it on and I started to manage his properties. And what I mean by the heavens opening up in my previous statement is that not only is he a lifetime client, and he's still a very close friend of mine. So Bob was a financial advisor, and his job was to work with Fortune 500 companies, very wealthy individuals, and help them strategize their retirement and their lifestyles with their jobs, their corporate jobs. And so he did stock trading. He did 401ks. I mean, you name it. He was to really just help really wealthy people know what to do with their money to make their money work for them while they're sleeping, right? So, Bob was invested in real estate and Bob didn't just buy one property. Bob just kept buying. He kept buying properties and I kept managing the properties. But the other thing that Bob did for me is he kept referring people to me. Client after client after client, referral after referral after referral. So while I was in the Century 21 brokerage, I ended up building a property management portfolio by referrals from Bob to 250 units under management. Crazy in a very short amount of time.
Okay, let's just take a moment for a second. That is a huge. Now, so what was the time span between Bob's first call and getting to that 250 mark?
About a year and a half.
That's it?
Under 2 years. Yep.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yep. Because, going back to, and this, again, some of this is just understanding what I was taught as a young person, right? Surround yourself with people smarter than you. So I gravitated to Bob and I was very willing to listen to whatever he said. I was always willing to do the right thing, right? So when I mess things up, and I certainly mess things up, I would ask for forgiveness, I would make it right, and I would learn from it. Anytime he would say a word to me that I didn't understand, or he referred somebody to me that said a word that I didn't understand, I would go research it. I would research the heck out of it because I needed to know what they were talking about and why they were thinking that way. And it started to become like this, almost like this infatuation for me of just this knowledge. I was so mesmerized by this knowledge and how wealthy people think about money and what they do with it and why they're planning and why they're buying real estate investments. I was just intrigued by this that I literally dove all in. No clothes on. Like I just dove. Everything, head to toes, because I was so immersed in this information that I couldn't let it go. It was like the book that you read that you can't put down
Yeah.
from start to finish. That's what this was like for me. It was the book I couldn't put down because I was so intrigued why people were doing these things. And, remember, I had a little taste of it because my parents did it. And I saw like the small version of what it did for them and their lifestyle. And now he's doing it because he's trying to, essentially replace his full-time income in his corporate job. And this is his retirement plan. And it was also his plan to put his kid through college. And, I was like, I want all those things. I want
Yeah.
retirement. I want to put my kids through college if they choose to go to college. So I was just so intrigued. There's just no other word for it. I was just so intrigued by the education and the knowledge that I just listened to everything and researched everything to the end, right? And Bob bought multiple properties, one after another, and I ended up managing all of them. And he kept referring people, and for him, I think today, because we joke about it today, I say things, so you had to have known that I didn't actually know what I was doing. And he's like, most certainly, most certainly. And I've said to him recently, I said, what, why me? Why me? Why did
'Cause
you
you called
hang
him
on
back.
as long as
You showed up differently.
yeah, he said, well, you did call me back. Number one, that was a leg above the rest of the industry. He says, but number two, you were unwilling to fail. And when you did, because you fell flat on your face a couple of times. He goes, you were willing to get up, dust yourself off, admit that you were wrong, and make it right. And he says that I just knew from that moment that you were a business partner that I wanted to have for life. And,
Wow.
again, when I say the heavens opened up, there was so much with just Bob and the learning,
Yeah.
right? It made me completely pivot my entire real estate career. It was that insightful for me. It was that it was so massive for me that I realized that, hold on a second, I don't have to go knocking on doors. I don't have to be talking to people that hang up on me on the phone because they don't want to talk to me. I've got somebody here that actually genuinely wants to work with me. And all I have to really ever do is do the right thing, make up for my mistakes if I make them, and they're willing to provide me free education. And all I have to do is just kind of work my butt off a little bit. Well, I can do that. I'm a mother of three, right? I work my butt off. That's all I do, right? So that's kind of what it was. And that was not only a pivotal moment for me from an educational standpoint, but it was a pivotal moment for me and how I viewed business. And it was a pivotal moment for me on how I viewed the real estate industry.
Interesting. So talk a little bit more about that, because what I find remarkable in this story about Bob, and so you had already made some pretty clear decisions about how you wanted to show up in business. Obviously, and I've already commented on this, your work ethic was above par. For you to show up the way no one else is showing up is a statement in and of itself. And then the other aspect was you allowed Bob to mentor you, to work with you. And so I think that the two of you coming together created something really special, because I don't know that he was necessarily looking for someone like you to mentor along the way, invest that type of time in kind of bringing you up to speed in this area that you just didn't have a lot of experience or any experience, quite frankly. But
Right.
the fact that you were willing to be that person and just showed up it automatically, I would imagine, just triggered Bob to be like, okay, I can actually help Jennifer work the way I want to work. And, the two of us can benefit from each other. And I just think that that is so rare that those types of co-creative relationships come together to create something amazing. And Bob was a winner because he got all these properties. He got to shore up his investment portfolio from the standpoint of the real estate diversification that he was looking for. And then you got all this education and, boots on the ground experience working with these properties, doing the property management and all of those aspects in those early days. And what I wanted to ask you about is, as you were coming in and just kind of like eating it up like at a buffet and learning everything, what were some of the critical things that those first encounters and those first engagements with Bob, or maybe even one or two of his referrals, that really helped you embrace a larger piece of the experience of using real estate as an investment tool?
Oh man, oh my God, there's so much. I mean, again, we could go on for months, weeks, years about it, but okay, I think to break it down really basically, after Bob bought the first property, right, and I started managing that property, what I started to realize from that first property is what he really wanted was passive investing, meaning that he didn't want to always tell me what to do, right? He wanted me to learn how it was affecting his bottom line. And he wanted me to, essentially monitor that or protect that. As he started referring people, and I can't really remember if he bought a second property before the first referral, but they were really, really close together. Because remember, we built 250 units in under 2 years. So there was a lot of referrals there. What I learned from the referrals that was a little different than what I learned from Bob was each of the people that he referred me to looked at money and financial freedom a little bit different. They were similar in a lot of aspects. Everybody was trying to replace their income of their corporate job, every single one of them. And every single one of them had a fear of being downsized. And every single one of them wanted to either travel or put their kids through college or a combination of both, right? So that was the similarities. The differences were how they saw that return on investment. It was the financial aspect of it, right? Some people go into real estate because they need cash flow. Some people go into real estate because they need appreciation and equity. Some people actually go into real estate looking for negative returns to offset their tax liability. So everybody looks at it a little bit different. How they calculated their returns and what was profitable versus not profitable from an investment perspective, like what is going to make you buy this or not buy this, even that criteria was different from person to person. So what was very interesting is that I got to, with all of these referrals, see how everybody that was wealthy looked at money. And we're talking about all different extremes of wealth, but wealthy people, right? All that have made it in their roles, in their job, in their life. And, they were now using real estate as that vehicle for stability, for financial freedom, for retirement, for travel, for college. I mean, it was powerful. And every one of these people had money in stocks, bonds, IRAs, 401ks. I mean, you name it, they had their money in those things too. Some were even into crypto and all those things. But everybody shared a very similar story, which is they felt that real estate was the vehicle that was the most reliable and the most robust for their money, for them to duplicate, triplicate, whatever they needed to do, their earnings, so that they could have this wonderful little nest egg at retirement whenever that happened. So, I learned lots of things from that. I learned that the real estate industry has a lot of these really key benefits, tax benefits, tax shelters, depreciation, appreciation, equity. I mean, you name it. Real estate is the one vehicle and all the other things that you can do with your money that provides you so many opportunities to really keep the money in your pocket, right? Pay less to the IRS, and keep the most amount of money in your pocket. But it was also the vehicle where people felt their money was most protected. So what I was learning was how people viewed money, how they analyzed it differently. Nobody was wrong. Every one of those people is still, they're still clients today. They still invest in properties and real estate. They still make a lot of money, but they all looked at it different. So nobody was actually really wrong. And they all kind of wanted the same thing. They were so busy in their corporate careers and their lifestyles and the things that they were already doing that they really wanted somebody that they could trust to watch over their properties so they weren't losing money and they were making money and that they could achieve the successes that they were looking for. The other thing that I started to learn is that we had a hole in our industry. So as I started to understand what property management was, what that meant to them specifically, and I started to network and communicate with other management companies that were in existence at the time, I started to learn that what I was building with Bob in his guidance was actually unintentional. I was just listening and following instructions. What I was putting together was the roadmap. So, for example, I one time hired a vendor that I paid up front to do like half down and then half at the end, right? I paid him half to start the work. It was like a plumbing job or an HVAC job. And I paid him half down because that's what is standard in the industry. He did the job. He sent me the invoice, said the work was done, and I paid him the remaining amount of money. All logical, right? Well, he didn't actually finish the job.
Mm.
And I didn't check
Aha.
because why would I think I had to, right?
Exactly.
So I ended up losing.
Not everybody has your level of integrity, Jen.
Evidently not. But yeah, I learned a very valuable lesson, right? You cannot just expect that people are going to do what they say they're going to do. You can't even expect that they're going to do a good job. And no different than you would do in your own home, you have to do for investment properties. You hire somebody to do a job, you are obligated to verify that they finished that job prior to paying them their final check. So that was one of the examples of where I made it right. Right. I hired somebody else to go back and fix what the person was not doing or didn't do right or didn't do at all. And I paid for it because I already spent his money. I wasn't going to ask him again for more money. I had to make it right. And that was just one example. And there was so many lessons along the way. Another one that sticks out in my mind is, leasing properties, right? So somebody would move out of a property, whether they were evicted or whether they just gave notice. And then I would wait until they were out of the property, and then I would market the property and lease up the property. And Bob said to me one time, I wish we could close the gap on the vacancy, right? Yeah. I wish we could go from one tenant to another, were his exact words. And I was like, I bet you I can figure out a way to do that. And that's how I actually built the company. I listened to the feedback and then I would build a process around it. So when he said to me, I wish that we could rent it right after the last one, I'm like, well, I'm sure that there's a way to do that. So what we ended up doing was, and this has been something we've been doing for a decade and a half now, is we changed our leases to say, you have to give us 60 days notice. We're immediately putting the property on the market. And I started to measure our results. We knew that at that time, we needed 22 days to rent the property. From the time of marketing to the time somebody was signing a lease and moving in. 22 days is what we needed. And 30 was just too close for me, right? So I was like, let's do 60 days. We're going to make everybody give a 60-day notice, and we're going to put the property on the market, and we're going to have tenants move in right after one moves out. And I started to do that, and it started to have a huge impact on Bob's bottom line. As he was sharing with me the results of that change that I made, and I got to see all the way down to his cash flow and his net income, right? Like what that change did for his bottom line. it was really powerful because I was like, oh my God, I'm really in control here. I'm either going to completely royally screw this up or I'm going to make you a lot of money because this is a process, right?
Yeah.
So I started listening more and I started building processes around what the investors were saying. So if they said, I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do that, or do you see how I didn't make money in this situation, right? I would just listen and I'd build a process around it. So going back to what I was saying about like comparing myself to other property management companies, I started to at the same time, like simultaneously realize that what I was creating was far superior than the market or the industry was, like the cookie cutter property management company that was out there. And what I mean by that is when you hire a property management company, so let's say I'm Bob, I hire a property management company. I am not a passive investor. I am an active investor. I've got to boss around the property management company because they don't have any idea what the financial baseline is. They have no idea what net operating income is. They have no idea what your return on your investment is. They don't even look at those metrics. Some of them don't even pay bills, right? So what they do is tasks, right? They collect rent, they go to court, they handle repairs and maintenance, but they only do that with the direction of the owner. So Bob could hire a property management company, but that property management company is going to call him every day, once a week, whatever it may be, and ask permission for things, right? Bob didn't want to give me permission. He wanted to see that I had a brain and I could follow this outline.
That is the distinction between a true partner and a vendor. And that is a huge thing. And as I've been listening, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so good. You are actively, and I'm sure at the time you were probably thinking, okay, this is just how I'm learning, how I'm growing my skill set, how I'm increasing my capabilities. But to have that level of a partnership attitude, as well as having your finger on the pulse of what your customers wanted, because you were asking. When they would say something, you'd say, well, I can figure that out. I can do that. And I think that the magic of your approach and your attitude around problem solving and serving your clients the way you did is what is just baked into your DNA, first of all, and what I personally know of you, as well as the stories that you're telling. It's like your level of integrity and attention to your clients and what they need is not just your hunger for learning and expanding your experience. It's about service. And I think that that is definitely something that people just don't have today. And it's disappointing. That's why you stand out. That's why you're able to curate these long, decade plus long relationships with your clients. And I think that that is so critical, especially in today's landscape of not just real estate and investing, but just the marketplace in general when it comes to real estate. So what I want to do now is I want to take a break and we're going to continue because this is a great point for us to move into how you got started with your businesses. And we're going to cover that in our next episode. So any final thoughts, Jen?
No, I don't think so.
I know. See, we were going, and if I didn't step in and say, okay, we need to pause here because you were hitting your stride, man. You could have told lots of stories. So for the listener, I'm sorry I had to cut Jen off, but I'm trying to be courteous to your time. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
That's it for now. If passive income from real estate investments plays a role in your long-term investment strategy, this show is for you. Thanks for listening. And for more in-depth resources, please head over to growingempires.com.